So let's go about creating settings inside our Emp app. First step, open up the domain model and we'll need to drag on an entity, and let's call the entity settings. You could call it global settings, whatever you like. I'm going to tap on new and let's have two attributes. So we'll have pay rise. That's going to be a number. Let's make it a decimal number so we can have values like 1.2, 1.1, something like that. I'll click on OK, and I'm going to click on new, and I'm going to have something like pay rise allowed, and let's make this a boolean. So boolean will have values of true or false. That's perfect as to whether pay rises are going to be allowed or not. Click on OK, and there's my entity. Now, because this is going to be something that we use for settings, it's going to be single values. Obviously, we need to have that microflow that's going to be controlling access to the values from that bit of the domain model, from that entity. So let's create a microflow to do that. I'm going to add a microflow. I'm going to use the same style again, so get or create settings, something like that. Here it is. So first thing we do is we have to retrieve the values. Now we're going to retrieve the values for the settings object. So from the database, we want to get the settings values, but here's the trick, we only ever want to get the first row. Okay, like that. Now it's possible that that might be empty. If it isn't empty, we're going to need to create that first row. So I'm going to go create object here. I'm going to wire that to there, and then we have two possible end events. In either situation, we're going to pass out those values. Either we're going to pass out the values that we've managed to retrieve, or if there aren't any values there, in other words, let's say this was the first time this microflow is run, we're going to need to create those values. So let's customize this. I'm going to double tap on this object type decision, and I'm basically going to say, what are we actually going to be testing? We're going to be testing that settings object that we've retrieved. Now there are two possible outcomes here. Either it's empty. Now the way to do this is to hover over the little blue dot and go right mouse click, condition value, empty, and that will automatically set this one over here. So here's the flow. Retrieve that first row. If we've got it, pass it out. If we've not got it, in other words, if it was empty, come down here and create those values. So I'm just going to double tap on here. Let's create those values. We're going to create a settings object. In other words, the first row of that table. That's how you can visualize it. I'm going to tap on new. Now we can set the default values for that first row. We'll set pay rise. It's a decimal. Let's set it to 1.0. That's absolutely fine. And the second one is are pay rises allowed. Now if you can't remember how to do this, you can just tap on generate. Because it's a boolean, we can have false or we can have true. Let's hit it to false straight away. Okay. Now the only other thing we have to configure here are the little red dots to say what information is going to be passing out. Double tap on that, and we can use the control space to say we'll be passing out settings. And down here it says we have to tell Mendix what kind of thing this is that we're actually passing out. And if you know what it is, you can just type it in here, or you can just tap on this button. And it says we're going to be passing out a thing called settings, which is of type, it's going to be a settings object. I'll do the same for this one. It's going to be, but in this instance, it's going to be, because we're creating it, it's got the name new settings. And again, it's going to be a settings object. There we are, there's a microflow set up. Now I've done that quite quickly, but it is covered in the previous video. So I've got the domain model bit done. I've got my microflow done. Now I need a way to actually change those settings. So this is the second step. Let's create a form page. So I'm going to have a blank form, and let's call it change settings, like that. Now pop up won't have anything in it. The data container that we're actually interested in is going to be this data view, so I'm just going to pop that on there. Let's change the data source. Let Mendix do the hard work for us. What kind of entity is it going to be displaying? Well, it's going to be displaying a settings object. Click OK. Allow it to fill the data view. Now what I would like is, I think it's quite nice if this is like a dialog box that pops up. So I'm going to tap here and I'm going to go into the properties, and under layout type we can say it's a modal pop-up. There, that looks like a nice dialog box. So I'm just going to save that. The final thing we need to do is we need to have a microflow that links our get or create settings microflow to this panel. So I'm going to add a microflow, and let's call it show settings. That's probably quite good, isn't it? Show settings. And this does two things. So into the toolbox, we need to run the microflow to actually get the values. So we call the microflow and then we show the page, which is down here. So call the microflow. The microflow that we're going to call is going to be the get or create settings microflow, like that. So what that's going to do is that's going to run and that's going to get the values that we need for this to do its work, but only ever get the first row, get one row. What page are we actually going to show? Well, we're going to show the, we called it change settings page. There it is, like that. Save it. One tiny little step left, which of course is we need to have a way of actually running this whole thing. Now previously I did this by putting a button on the front page, but I thought it would be quite nice to do this in a different way. So I'm going to do it using the navigation. We've got the panel on the left, which has got the navigation icons. Let's do it as a little cog. We'll do it in a different way here, but we'll just do it as a little cog. So I'm going to new item. Let's go settings. And I think we can actually, I think there is a sort of cog icon in here. There it is. What are we going to do? Well, don't fall into the trap of thinking we're going to show a page. We're going to call the microflow, which is going to show the page and do all that work, all that stuff that we've just set up. So show a page. Oops, did exactly what I said don't do. Not show a page. Call a microflow. Show settings. And there we are. So let's recreate our app and let's try it out, see what it does. Let's view the app. So now, with a bit of luck, in the column on the left, we've got a little cog. There it is. And what this will do is this will call that microflow. And what that microflow does is it gets or creates the first values for the settings and then pushes them into my settings page, which should be a pop-up dialog box. There it is. So we could say pay rises are allowed. We could say a pay rise of 10% will be allowed. Like that. Let's go back in. Maybe a pay rise of 5%, but they're not going to be allowed right now. Save it. Back in, and you can see we've just got single values. It's not like a database. It's not a series of database records. It's just a single value that we can then use in our app. So I could put that back to 1.1 and say pay rises are allowed, like that. Something like that. Obviously, the next step is to actually integrate the way that those values are going to be used inside our microflows, the existing microflows that we actually have inside employees. So we'll do that next.